Hello everyone, this is Captain Snuggles, coming back again with another episode of Jumplight Odyssey Basic Training. Last time I recorded one of these episodes, I had a really easy time because that was the resource management video. That was nice and short and sweet and to the point, but man, it is back to the grind today because I have a big topic to cover. Today's topic is going to be rooms and equipment. And so up to this point, we have covered the core capabilities of the Catalina, and we've covered the theory behind resource management, but we have not discussed the fine details. We have not talked about the specifics of how you build out your ship room by room and piece by piece to achieve that resource management, and more generally, to make the Catalina do what you want her to do. So that is what we will be going over today. I'm going to start out by talking about some of the basic fundamentals behind laying out and filling out your rooms on the ship. As we progress through the episode, we will start to pick up more and more opinions mixed in with the facts. And while I do think fairly highly of my own opinions, I do want to stress that Jumplight Odyssey is a single-player game. You can play this game however the heck you want to, and the correct way to play is not the way that I tell you to play. It's not based on my opinions. It's based on your playstyle, your needs and wants, what you want to get out of the game, and what you have the most fun with. So please bear that in mind as we go through this video. My opinions are just that. They're opinions. But we're going to start out with some facts. So, I want to take this episode from the top, take this topic from the top, and start out by talking about, well, the core of the rooms that you start with. The rooms that every single ship layout will have, and that will never change in terms of their fundamentals, no matter what you do. And so any room that has these brown tiles here cannot be reshaped. You cannot carve off parts of the bridge and put different rooms in there. All brown tile rooms are immutable. You can add things to them, but you cannot change their shape. All runs of the Catalina, all layouts of the Catalina will have all of these rooms I'm about to talk about. I'm starting on the empty layout here, but even the full layout, the canonical layout, will also have all these rooms looking basically the same when you first start out. So, let's talk through them one by one. First and foremost is the bridge. This is your command and control center. It has some things that the player interacts with, like the star map, the manifest, and the Jumplight switch. And it also has a variety of upgrades that can be installed to improve your command and control. We will talk about those later on. The next common room that we have is the transit hub. Now, these are essentially the landings for your turbo lifts, and you have one on the promenade that services the aft turbo lift connecting to the bridge, the hangar, the engine room, and the other two decks. Then you have two on the quarterdeck, one aft servicing that turbo lift I just talked about, and then one all the way at the front of the ship that services the flight control and the forward part of the lower deck. And the lower deck does have two transit hubs in the same position. These transit hubs are essentially just places for your crew to pass through when they exit the turbo lifts. They're good places to stick a few different varieties of common item, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later. But moving on through the overview of our sort of shared unchangeable rooms. We have flight control here, and this is in the forward part of the hangar. The hangar is also an unchangeable room. It houses your shuttles that you can build as upgrades, and it houses your basic stockpiles that'll store most of your resources throughout the game. The hangar really is largely modified and controlled through flight control. And so this is the room where you're going to build things to put modifiers on your hangar, unlock new ships, and unlock new capabilities for your existing shuttles and fighters. Now, I believe this is last, but it is certainly not least. This is the engine room. And, well, as you might expect, it is very important. It houses your Jumplight regulators. That's, well, if you don't have at least one Jumplight regulator, your ship explodes. So this right here is a very important part. But the part that you really interact with is down here. These various upgrades will improve or expand your Jumplight capabilities, which will improve your ability to move the ship from star to star. So that is a very important room. And we will talk more about all of these rooms while we go through the rest of the video. I almost forgot one too. Once again, I think this is the last one, but certainly not the least one. We have our turret rooms. These are fairly simple. These are where the turrets are operated. There are 4 on the quarterdeck in the Catalina and 4 on the lower deck. We talked about these a little bit in my Catalina overview video. There are a couple of upgrades that you can build for the turrets, and we'll talk about those when the time comes. So that, at last, I believe, is the full rundown of the common, standard, unchangeable rooms on the Catalina. Now, another type of room that you will see on the Catalina is the empty room. These dark, gray, unfinished-looking squares here are, in fact, dark, gray, and unfinished. Now, empty rooms, you cannot build anything at all in empty rooms. Period. All you can do is add new rooms within the empty room, and then you can build things in those new rooms. Empty rooms you cannot power, you cannot generate oxygen, you cannot do anything except add rooms to them. And as you can see, empty rooms are bad things to have your crew moving through, because they will just slowly drift around in zero gravity, and probably with enough time they'll use up all the oxygen in here, which is, well, not ideal. I suppose honorable mention should go to the observation doors and the airlocks. I wouldn't necessarily call them rooms, but these observation decks do allow your crew to stargaze. The airlocks, well, allow the Zootopans to get on your ship. So there's the full overview of the pre-existing sections of your ship that you will see when you start any run. All right, now with that finally out of the way, we can start to get to the good stuff, which is building rooms. And the first thing that I want to talk about with this section is the idea of building with a purpose. Now, in my Hell Mode run, for example, my purpose was to get the most bang for my buck and build small, compact rooms that gave me a lot of services for a minimal investment of resources. I think that's a good skill to have generally in this kind of game, but that isn't always going to be your purpose. So, before you start building any room, think about what the purpose of that room is in the context of your run and your situation, and try to build only the room that's going to fill that purpose. And so custom tailor each room that you build to the purpose you have in mind for it. Now, as I mentioned before, there are a lot of different playstyles for this game. I have more of an efficient minimalist sort of playstyle. Other folks are the opposite. They want to cram as many people and things onto the ship as they possibly can, but still have the ship function, and so they'll build for that purpose. Their rooms will look very different from mine. Some people will take a very combat-focused approach and just fight the Zootopans whenever they can. They'll build out rooms with a defensive focus in mind. And some folks like to just have a cool-looking ship that they can watch their crew live their lives in. And that's also a totally legitimate purpose, and their rooms will look very, very different from mine. And so I am going to talk through room layout through my lens of trying to be resource efficient, playing as if I were turning this empty start into a full run. But bear in mind that while you can take some of these things that I'm teaching and apply it to anything, your rooms will look different than mine, so really I'm trying to convey this general idea of thinking critically about what you need, what your room's purpose is, and building it around that. And so with that in mind, let's get into it. So, I'm running an empty start. I have nothing on the ship except for those pre-made rooms that I talked about earlier. And well, this ship has needs, and one of those immediate needs is that I have 2 unconscious crew members and 15 wounded crew members. And so I am going to need a medbay, for sure. Now, I have given myself a decent many resources, so I have some things to work with, but this is still an empty run, and I need to be careful how many resources I spend. So, let's start building out a medbay with that in mind. So, I want to have it here, close to the turbo lifts, so that we can get Metagel and people, and patients and doctors, into the medbay as quickly as possible. So I'm going to try and put it here. I'm going to see what I can do with the 2x2 here. I may expand it out to 3x3. But bear in mind that every single tile of room that you put down costs you 2 metal when it's constructed. And that can really add up quickly. So, if you're trying to be efficient, you want to start small, and I am certainly trying to be efficient. Now, one thing that all rooms need is access to a turbo lift. Direct or indirect, there has to be some kind of a pathway through a single door or a series of doors that will connect to one of these transit hubs right here. So we have to connect this room in either on this side or this side, or well, any of those 3 sides, just so long as we connect in to the transit hub. Given our goals of efficiency, we're going to put the door on this side to make sure that we can connect in as quickly as possible. If we wanted maximum efficiency, we could have moved this door from the transit hub over to here, but I might have plans for that later, so for right now I'll leave it, but I could have done that. Now then, we've met the basic prerequisites for a room. I can confirm this room right now, and people will start building it. But this is a medbay. We're going to need some things in this room. We are going to need to power all of our equipment in here, and we're going to want gravity for our patients. So we'll need to drop a power switch. We also do not want people asphyxiating in their hospital beds, so we're going to add an oxygen generator. And then, of course, we need the treatment area itself. So we're going to put down some medical beds. Now, I should mention here the idea of your ability to block the interaction spots of various pieces of equipment. And when I say interaction spots, I specifically mean these 2 footprints here. So when you prepare to put down a piece of equipment, it will show you these little footprint icons that indicate where people will need to go to utilize this piece of equipment. In this case, there's a spot for the doctor and a spot for the patient. So if we put this here, or if we tried to put this here, for example, it won't let us because there's a wall in the way blocking people's access through this booth. So we need to make sure not to block that. We also need to make sure not to block this little arrow right here. This is an input hopper, is what I call it. It's the input sort of loading area for the resources that go into this device. Some devices will also have an output if it's something that, say, like a metal extractor, takes in material and spits out metal. Well, there will be a spot to load material and offload metal. So you want to keep an eye out for these little arrows and make sure that nothing is blocking them. Now, conveniently enough, wall-mounted devices like these, they do have a footprint on the floor, and by that I don't mean an interaction spot footprint. I mean there's a spot on the floor that they technically take up that you can't build other things in, but you can walk through that spot. And so that's really nice. Because of that, you can put these wall-mounted devices right next to a door without impeding the flow of people or resources, which is absolutely great. So, generally speaking, right by the door is a great place to put your wall-mounted items because it ensures flow of people and things through the room. Now, let's think about the function of this medbay, building with purpose. We have a lot of people to heal. 15 wounded and 2 unconscious, so a total of 17 folks will need to be healed at some point. We could lay out the room like this. This is a pretty good use of space. However, we may eventually need to expand this medbay, and we may want a couple other things in here. And so, if we wanted to expand later on, these 2 medical beds would actually block that expansion and really be in the way. So planning for the future there, I'm going to put our 2 beds here. That will allow us to treat these 15 wounded. Now we also have these 2 unconscious, and so we are going to need another wall-mounted item here. It's going to be the medkit locker. That will allow our scientists to revive these unconscious people. And this locker does have the actual footprint, an actual interaction spot, but once again, it's the same as these other 2 devices. People can walk through it without issue. So once again, on the same wall as the door is a great place to put that. Now then, there are other things that I might want to do with this room eventually, but the way we've set it up, it fills all our basic needs for now. We'll treat wounded, and we'll treat unconscious people, and we've left ourselves room to grow on this end. We can expand this wall out with no issue. So with that, we can go ahead and confirm this blueprint, and people will get started. Now, in the interest of time, I am not going to sit and wait through this entire process, but I'll let it play out while I talk. And so, when you order construction of any room, the first thing that happens is the engineers build the walls, and that's what's happening right here. The second thing that happens is suppliers, like you just saw, will drop off the metal required for the floor tiles, and then the engineers will build that floor, and you're seeing that right now. Then and only then will the rest of the things in the room get built. So only once all the walls and floor are done will suppliers even deliver supplies to the other blueprints. And if there's a blueprint that requires completion of something else in the room to function, for example, a power switch or a dependency object, the suppliers will generally only deliver supplies once those prerequisites are met. Now, I misspoke on the power switch. They will deliver supplies for things that require power, even if the power switch is not complete. However, those dependency objects have to be completed before supplies will even be delivered. Right, and I said we weren't going to watch this whole thing, but hey, we're close enough now. We'll keep watching. There we go. So now, finally, we've seen this room get completed. We already have somebody grabbing medkits and going to deliver that medkit and revive an unconscious person. And we should start seeing supplies get delivered to the medical beds, that metagel get input, and then people will start to use them. And so with just this very small space and a very small number of resources, we have a functioning medbay that will provide for this need that we have identified. Will it fill all our needs throughout the rest of the run? No, we'll need some more eventually. But for right now, we are building with a purpose. We have made a very efficient little room that will indeed fill that purpose. And so there we have it. That is the core theory. Once again, if your core gameplay style is different than mine, if you're starting with a more generous start, if you're less resource limited, or if you just want to accomplish different things, your thought process will look a lot different from that. However, the general principles of thinking through your needs and building to meet those needs should remain the same. I realize I forgot to talk about one very important key concept of building, and that is object dependencies. And so these are essentially like technology trees in most other games. You have to build a certain piece of equipment to unlock a higher technology level and unlock sort of a tier of dependent objects. So let's see that in action with our demonstration medbay. Let's say we want some faster healing for our wounded people, and to do that, we're going to need to build a diagnostic scanner. Now, we can see that we cannot build this yet because it's giving us a couple of red flags. On the right, it tells us that it has an object dependency on a diagnostics computer in the same room, and we can also see that it's in this dependency tier of advanced care. So we have to build that diagnostic computer to unlock this advanced care technology tier. So we can go to our diagnostic computer here, indicated by the little dependency triangle in the top left, and start to plan it out. So I can tell you right now, all of this stuff is not going to fit in this little room, so we'll have to expand it out a little bit. And then we can build this computer, and we can build our diagnostic scanner, being careful to keep an eye on the interaction spots and make sure nothing is blocking off anything else. So we've tucked the computer out of the way there where it won't cause any problems, and we've checked to make sure that the crew can actually step onto this platform for the scanner, and both those things are fine. So we will go ahead and confirm. Now, we're not going to sit through this entire process, but if we did, what we would see is that the crew would go through the same process that we saw before of actually building out the room itself with the walls and then the floor, and then they will deliver to the diagnostics computer. Then they will build the diagnostics computer, and only once that dependency object is fully completed, only then will the crew begin to deliver and construct those dependent blueprints, so the scanner or anything else in that advanced care tier. And so that is the long and the short of technology tiers. With that, we can move on to the next section of the video. Okay, this is the third time I have re-recorded this section of the video, because I have really been struggling with how to mix the facts of rooms and equipment with my opinions on rooms and equipment. I think I have arrived at a good compromise here. So the format for this section of the video is I will talk through each type of room on the Catalina, type by type by type. For each one, I'll talk about the core functions and purpose of the room. Then I'll give my thoughts on how big the room should be and where the room should be located on the ship. And then I will talk about the equipment that can go in the room. but I'm not going to talk about every single piece of equipment. I'm going to leave out a lot of my less tested opinions, and instead I'm going to focus on the equipment that, in my experience with my runs, has either really helped me succeed or been really detrimental, things that really just have not worked out. And so I'm only going to be talking about things that I have a strong opinion on, and everything in between, or everything that I just don't know about, I'm going to leave completely off the table, and you all can go out and experiment and form your own opinions on it. So hopefully that will give us a nice mix of the hard facts and some good sort of battle-tested opinions of mine. Hopefully that will arm you all with some solid information that you can go and build upon on your runs. That is the hope. Let's see how I do. So I think a good place to start is with the most basic room you can make, the corridor. So the corridor is very basic, but it is unique. It has a passive buff to the movement speed of all crew within the corridor, especially the movement speed of suppliers. And along with some bridge upgrades that we'll talk about later, that can really boost the transport of people and resources throughout the ship. And so in terms of the size of the corridor, well, you want your corridors to be wide enough and extensive enough to connect all the various parts of your ship where you expect foot travel and resources to need to go. And in terms of the positions of the corridors, well, I talked about this in a previous video. I don't love corridors with a lot of right angles. I prefer for corridors to be nice, straight lines from point A to point B that really efficiently connects rooms to one another, and especially really efficiently connects supplies and crew quarters to the rooms that most need supplies and crew. Things like manufacturing and greenhouses, for example. Now, the big reason why I wanted to start with corridors is because corridors can have all of the shared equipment in them. So this whole list of 16 objects here can all be built in corridors, and these are shared between a lot of different room types. Not all of them can build all of these, but many of them can. And so corridors are great locations for a lot of these shared objects because, sure, you have some of the basics like power and oxygen generation from your power switch, oxygen generator, and your shrubberies, but you also have a lot of things that your crew might need to just use on a whim or suddenly pick up in a time of need. For example, fire extinguishers, weapons, armor, medkits, and things like drinks, sodas to quench their thirst, and seats to grab a little bit of rest on the go. So a lot of those, these sort of need-based objects, are great things to scatter around your sort of high-traffic areas of the ship, like corridors and like transit hubs that we'll talk about later. And so that's sort of the winning combination, in my opinion. Nice, straight corridors, wide enough to accommodate a lot of traffic, with some nice shared buildables scattered throughout to accommodate your crew's needs. One room down. Next up is the crew quarters. Now we'll go up to here and take a look. And so the crew quarters are where your crew goes to fill their needs, especially for rest, connectedness, and their morale as well. And so looking at what you can build in these crew quarters, well, there are a couple of dependency tiers in here. We're not going to talk about caffeination and tea because those are really, really greenhouse-based, so anytime these show up, we're going to ignore them. But the specific dependency tiers for the crew quarters are the close quarters and the private suite, unlocked by the shift schedule and the personal terminal, respectively. Now, in terms of the real winners in crew quarters, I think it is the double bunk and the card table. The close quarters is really the best bang for your buck. The private suite, sure, it's fine, but these are the run winners right here. Double bunk and the card table 100% are great buildables. You can also add some decorations to the crew quarters. Honorable mention for essential objects goes to the fish tank. It has actual fish in it. It's great. Love it. But it doesn't actually do anything. Alright. In terms of the location and size of the crew quarters, the size depends on your crew. I frequently find myself gradually expanding my crew quarters or building more as my crew expands, because you do want to have enough bunks and card tables and whatnot to fill all of the needs of your crew even as it expands. And sometimes I'll have two crew quarters, one for rest, one for connectedness, the gambling den, I sometimes call it. In terms of the location, you don't really want crew quarters occupying super prime real estate. So thinking of prime real estate as this section of the quarterdeck where you're going to have a lot of resources moving around. Crew quarters don't really need that many resources, and so they don't need to be right in the mix down there, but your crew does congregate there, and shortening the travel time from places your crew congregates to places your crew works, well, that's pretty nice. So you don't want to have your crew quarters too far out of the way. I would say this default location on the promenade is pretty nice. It has good access to the turbo lifts without interfering with the flow of supplies and the usage of space in that prime real estate on the quarterdeck. Right. Next up, we have the washrooms. These are nice and simple. The hang on, there we go. Had a little bug there going on. There we go. The washrooms are where your crew goes to fill their hygiene needs. Now there are a couple of other non-hygiene related items in here. These are bad. They're basically just for roleplay right now. I don't recommend them. The winners are the shower cubicle and the wash basin, and you can get away with just a couple of each in sort of a small, narrow washroom. So, sort of a 1x3 or a 1x4 strip with a few facilities scattered throughout. That will be totally fine. And if you have a couple of those in sort of key locations where your crew can get at them, that's great. So, one here at the apt of the promenade is nice. And then I do like to have one somewhere on the quarterdeck as well, a little bit out of the way. So somewhere like up here, for example, I think is a nice spot for it, just so your crew can go and wash up as needed. Alright, next up is the Regent's Chambers. These are currently just for roleplay. Eventually, the Promises system is going to be added to the game, and that will be operated through the Regent's Chambers, I believe. That is essentially like a leader buff that you can get. But for right now, they're roleplay only, and even then, they're not going to occupy a central part of the ship, because they're really just for one person, Princess Euphora, and she does not need to be right in the middle of everything. So if you build these, they can be way off to the side somewhere. Now then, another weird one right now is the cargo hold. And so, your ship already has really good storage on the hangar deck. It's not in a perfect spot, but it's in a pretty good spot. It has fine access to the turbo lifts here, which then have fine access to this part of the quarterdeck. Where the cargo holds are going to come into play is, number one, if you start expanding out farther farther from the turbo lifts, farther from easy access to that hangar stockpile, then you're going to want to start thinking about storing cargo closer to its destination, closer to those manufacturing rooms, those greenhouses, and other sort of high resource rooms. It can also be nice to have a small sort of strategic reserve, just, you know, a couple of squares, just to have slightly faster flow of resources between rooms. That being said, in the current build, it's not really that useful just because of how storage works. That being said, if you are going to build a cargo hold, use the double storages. These are unique to cargo holds. They're more efficient than the single storage. So, if you're going to build the cargo hold, might as well build the unique storage types. Alright. Now the galley. This is a pretty cool one. So, here is a galley with pretty much everything built. And so, there are 4 types of kitchens. The winner, the absolute number one, is the salad kitchen, because it restores hunger and it restores health. And it has no downsides. So, it is awesome. Highly recommend it. Restores 10% health per meal and 10 HP, which can really take the edge off of a dangerous shuttle mission, for example, or damage taken from dehydration, things of that nature. Salad Kitchen can really help with just the general upkeep of your crew. The regular kitchen and the fast food kitchen, they're fine. Then the ration kitchen I really do not recommend. It just doesn't accomplish what it seems to be intended to do. It's very inefficient. The conversion of biomass to meals is much less efficient than the conversion of biomass to produce to meals from the other kitchens, and so the ration kitchen, it's fine for roleplay if you want your crew to eat algae goop out of a tin mug. Yeah. If that's a thing you want, then build the ration kitchen. If you want your ship to function properly, then build anything else. In terms of positioning, I think that this default position is really bad, because it is as far as you can get from the promenade turbo lifts. It's not an insane distance, but it's quite a ways away, and this is a high resource flow room. There has to be a steady flow of produce or biomass into the kitchen. And so, if you're transporting that stuff from your stockpiles in the hangar, this is a very long runtime. I think it's a little bit better to have your galley closer to the turbo lifts. I believe in my hell run, I put mine right here, and that was a great spot. So I recommend it's closer for faster transport of produce or biomass. In terms of its size, this is too big. You can get away with half of this. Half this size is totally fine. 2 kitchens and 2 tables are usually enough to fill any normal-sized crew's bellies. All right, what do we have next? Manufacturing. This one, most of this, take it or leave it. All 3 levels of dependency unlock. I could do without, but I don't have strong opinions. The real winners, in my experience, in manufacturing are the metal extractor and the plastic fabricator. Now, they're both very slow, painfully slow at producing metal and plastic. But, over time, they can really generate some good benefits for you, so it's important to get this room running early. And it's important to have it in a sort of prime real estate spot, because it's very resource intensive. You have to have a constant flow of material and biomass to get good efficiency out of your manufacturing room. It also has to be a large room, because the stuff you put in it is very large. And so, really, In a normal run, I would have it about twice this size, so I can get at least one metal extractor and one plastic fabricator in there. And I might even make it bigger than that. So this position that I have displayed here is good, but the size should be a lot bigger. And again, making metal and plastic is the #1 purpose of manufacturing. You just have to start it early and keep those supplies flowing. What's next? Power station. Right, this is the absolute wrong spot for a power station. It should be lower down, because a good power station does not need much flow of personnel, and it doesn't need any flow of supplies. And so you should have it sort of tucked out of the way and free up this prime real estate. The reason why a good power station doesn't need those things is because a good power station has 2 things in it: an advanced energy panel, and as many nuclear reactors as you need. The nuclear reactor is the absolute best reactor out there, and I highly recommend it. Really, in terms of my personal recommendations, that's it. Tuck your power plants out of the way, get yourself this dependency unlock, and build some nuclear reactors, and you will not have to worry about power. Nuclear reactors are big though, so make sure you leave yourself enough room to expand the power station as needed. Okay, next up is the greenhouse. Now this is a high traffic, high resource requirement, and high space requirement room. So you want this to be very similar to manufacturing. You want it to be a big room, at least twice this size, sort of extending out into here is where I would put it. You want it to be in the prime real estate near the turbo lifts. And you want to ensure that flow of people and resources, because just like manufacturing, if that flow is interrupted, your greenhouse will not produce very well, and if your greenhouse doesn't produce very well, your crew's going to get hungry, and we do not love that. Now, I'm not going to talk at all about the stuff that goes into the greenhouse, the various crops, because there is already an excellent guide out there on Steam for that. Check out the Crop Yields Guide by Prince Ponley. It is absolutely excellent, better than anything I could put together here. He has some nice write-ups for you about all the different crops, and he even has a spreadsheet with the cold, hard numbers on it. And I do love cold, hard numbers, so absolutely go check that out. It's a great guide, and he worked very hard on it. And that makes my life easier, because we can move right to the next room, which is the Medbay. We'll go up to there. So the Medbay is for, well, healing your crew first and foremost, and it's also for storing your crew members who are beyond healing. So Medbay is the only possible spot for a morgue as of right now, and the morgue is the only way to store your dead bodies, and you do not want dead bodies lying on the ground. So that is an absolutely essential component of the Medbay, as is the standard medical bed. I also like the diagnostic scanner for that buff to recovery speed. Everything else on this whole list, I could take it or leave it, and you can experiment and form your own opinions on it. In terms of the location of the Medbay, early in the game, as you saw earlier in the video, I do like to have the Medbay in some prime real estate to quickly treat that first wave of wounded crew members. I do think that this is a better spot for the Medbay than that spot on the quarterdeck, because as time passes, the Medbay gets less and less important. You'll only have a couple of crew members getting wounded at a time, and so you're going to need less and less foot traffic and Metagel transportation coming in and out of the Medbay. So moving it up here to the aft of the promenade, or somewhere else on the promenade, is probably better than having it on the quarterdeck. In terms of the size of the room, this is a totally functional Medbay. If you start to add in weird stuff, like the higher tech dependency unlocks, then you're going to want a bigger room, because some of those get quite large. But for just the basic functions, this is totally fine. Alright, moving on through this. I'm going to skip the security hub for right now and go to the Waterworks, because the Waterworks are a much more boring room than the security hub, and they'll be easy to cover. So here we are. Now, out of all of the things I pointed out being in the wrong spot on this layout, this is the worst offender. The Waterworks need to be out of your way, absolutely. If they're somewhere where you have people and supplies moving through, they're in the wrong spot, because the Waterworks do not need people or supplies. They don't take anything to operate except for oxygen, and they don't need people to run any of the equipment. Now, it is good to tuck them somewhere where you'll be able to expand them, because you will frequently find yourself having to add more water condensers as time goes by. And let me quickly show where I normally put them. I normally drop them either here, which is honestly even a little bit too close to the turbo lifts. So I'll drop them there, but a better spot is sort of farther back here, where they'll really be out of the way, but you'll have plenty of room to expand along the lower deck. So that's my opinion on the Waterworks, but I think it's an irrefutable fact that they do not need to be anywhere in prime real estate. In terms of what you could put in them, water condensers. Put water condensers in them. Water tanks can be okay. They can help a little bit when your water supply fluctuates, which it will. They're not essential. Really, the key here is the water condenser. And, yep, that's it. I can do without everything else. And that now will bring us to the security hub. This is sort of your marine station, but as of right now, rather than its main function being to station marines, which you can, the security posts, the really important thing that you can do with this room is to unlock your turret upgrades. You can also unlock some shipboard security measures, which are fine, but not really very important. The really great thing about this room is the ability to build a secure server, and then a target designator and a target arrayer. That will enable you to fully upgrade your turrets, which will make a huge, huge difference in combat. Just absolutely night and day upgraded to unupgraded turrets. So strongly, strongly recommend secure server and both of these networked ordnance dependent modules. In terms of where the security room should be, if you're going to have Marines stationed in it, it's nice to post them somewhere sort of central so that they can quickly respond to threats. But if you're just using it to store these dependency modules, well, just tuck it out of the way somewhere. I would not put it here. But if you had Marines in it, there's maybe a case for putting it in this area. Alright, and that will segue nicely into starting to wrap up this video in the same place that we started it, which is with those common non-changeable rooms. Starting with the turrets that we were just talking about. And so your turret rooms have a couple of upgrade slots for stopping power and rapid fire, which are unlocked by those security room upgrades that we just talked about. Now, between the two, stopping power is better. It's absolutely great for accuracy, but it is expensive at 4 composites. So, this cheaper rapid fire can do in a pinch, and I like to have both on all of my turrets when I can afford it. Let's see. Next, we will talk about our engine room, I suppose. And so, you can build some shared modules over here, but really, it's this upgrade section that you want to focus on. And in here, the robot charging station I can do without. These three are great, especially the Jumplight calibrator and the Jumplight cartridge. In most situations, you will be able to afford the extra scientists to go and man the Jumplight calibrator, and they will charge Jumplight nice and quickly. And you need at least a couple of Jumplight cartridges. You absolutely need them to be able to just mechanically clear the game. Some jumps are so far that you need 1 or even 2 cartridges to extend your range. So a couple of these, absolutely critical, and you want to fill up the rest of the slots with either calibrators or auto-calibrators, and my money is on calibrators. Alright, from here, let's see. Well, we've landed right here in the transit hub. Why don't we talk about that? So, I'll go up to the promenade one to demonstrate a little bit better. So these transit hubs have a lot of people going through them. There's not a whole lot unique you can build in them, but you do generally want to fill them up with, again, those situational shared objects. Things like guns and medkits and fire extinguishers and armor, and soda machines and seats are all great to have so that crew members can fill their needs for rest and hydration sort of on the fly, and can respond quickly to fires and borders and injuries and all of that. Having all these things in the transit hubs really speeds up the ability of your crew to get access to those things when they need them. And that's it for the transit hubs, really. Now, I believe this is the second to last room, and this is where things begin to get interesting. So, the hangar. You can build some very cool spaceships in the hangar and get some cool upgrades for your hangar spaceships. And that is all done from here. This is the room, flight control, that unlocks all of those fancy spaceships. So, we have these 6 upgrade slots. Let's see what we can build in them. So, heavy array and high-speed comms that unlock the heavy and light shuttles respectively. I don't have any strong opinion. Robot charging station, no strong opinion. Radar amplifier is nice to have. You'll want 1 either here or on the bridge eventually. You might even want 2 here or on the bridge eventually. It's a good module to have. Doesn't necessarily have to be here, but you want 1 somewhere. The Jumplight projector. You see I have 1 built here, and so it's not like I don't build them, but I do not like the Jumplight projector. It is very inefficient. For all legitimate purposes, I think this is a bad upgrade. You can send the Catalina to a star system for the same amount of Jumplight it would take to send 1 shuttle to a star system. So that's a no-brainer for me. There are a couple of exploits that you can do with the Jumplight projector if you want to sort of cheat to give yourself an advantage, but I generally try not to do that, and so outside of those couple of exploits, there's not much of a use case for the Jumplight projector, in my opinion. Robot control is the opposite. This is a game changer. The drone fighters and drone shuttles that you can send out with this are excellent. They deploy quickly. They're not very good in terms of their effectiveness, but you can use them to do the grunt labor instead of having to use your good crew members to accomplish that, and that means that you can save your really good crew members for the missions that really matter. So this is a great upgrade. You can win without it, but it is a great upgrade nonetheless. And that is going to bring us to the bridge, which has 6 upgrade slots that are all meant to assist with your command and control or your Jumplight. So let's take a look. We have that same radar amplifier. Again, you'll want 1 or 2 somewhere on the ship at some point. Doesn't have to be here, but, drop a couple somewhere. The supply console is great. The science console is bugged right now, but it's great. These will both help you out quite a bit with your logistics and your Jumplight, respectively. These 3, combat engineering, robot charging, no strong opinion, so try them out, see for yourself. But yep, again, strongly recommend somewhere on the ship, radar amplifiers, and, once this bug gets fixed, science console and a supply console on your bridge that will really help with the with the command and control functions of the Catalina. And I do believe, and I certainly hope, that that was the full tour. I hope I didn't miss any rooms. There was a lot to cover and a lot of information I threw at you all. Even as condensed as I've tried to make this is still going to be a long video, so if you have made it this far, thank you very much for watching. I hope you learned something, and once again, a lot of this was my opinion. Take it with a grain of salt, but regardless, I hope that this has given you some benefit and that you've enjoyed the video. So, thank you for watching, and until next time, this is Captain Snuggles, signing off.